All right, for this block, we are going to be sewing the San Diego quilt block, and I've got all of my pieces pre-cut, so I am ready to get started with the half square triangles. So first thing is I'm going to draw a line on the wrong side of the fabric from corner to corner. I'm going to lay this right sides together with my background, and then I'm going to sew on both sides of that drawn line, trim it, and then iron it. So that is what our next step is the half square triangles. Okay, now that I have my pieces drawn, or if you have a laser or something on your sewing machine you can use, you're going to be sewing on both sides of the drawn line and then cutting on that drawn line. So our first step is to make sure we have right sides together, and then sew on the drawn line on both sides. Put your needle in the down position, pivot it over, and then lift it up, pivot one more time. I need to readjust something here. So if you need to move or adjust, just leave my needle down again. All right, so this is just repeating itself until you don't have any more of those left. Now that I have sewn on both sides of that drawn line, I can go ahead and cut right in the center of them, and this will separate them, giving me two half square triangles. So I can press these open to the dark and then square them up. All right, with my half square triangles all sewn and pressed, I'm going to now trim them up or square them up to 2 inches. I love using the block lock ruler. I use it every time I do half square triangles. So now we're going to be trimming them to 2 inches. All right, now that I have my half square triangles all squared up and ready to go, I can lay my block, the quilt block, out and start working on my smaller sections. Okay, I've got my Steady Betty that I'm going to use, or you can use any other board that you have that just, I lay it out on here and then transfer it over. So my first section is going to be the corner pieces, and there's 4 corners, so I need 4 solid squares in one corner and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the other, and then I need these half square triangles to be positioned so the background is in the center. So 1, 2, 3, 4. These are non-directional, so I can sew them like this, and after they're sewn, they can be pivot to each of the corners without any problems. Now I'm going to also lay out, looks like I missed one, my flying geese unit. And these are made with the triangle of the medium fabric and a 2.5 inch background piece that was not used for the half square triangles. So we're going to cut this in half diagonally. And we are going to sew 4 of these. Actually, we're going to sew 8 of them. 2, 4, 6, and 8. So I've got my 8 centers of the flying geese, and then with each of these we've got the 2 points. So I'm going to sew one edge first and then sew the other edge. So I'm going to finish cutting these. All right, so I can sew this unit and also this unit while I'm at the sewing machine. Okay, I'm going to start with my flying geese units, and we're going to be sewing 8 of them. So the first step is to take a center and sew one edge to it, lining up the corners, that point, and so your point is going to be coming off that edge right at the top there, and then sew a scant 1/4 inch as well. I'm going to just chain piece these, so I'm going to do all of them at the same time, making sure that I have them lined up properly prior to sewing. Just don't twist it around. Okay, and then we're going to just snip all of these apart. Because I did them into chains, so they've got all these connecting threads. All right, the next step is to press these to one side and then stitch the other piece on. Okay, I've got them all pressed, and so we are just going to continue down the other side. Again, making sure that we lay it out correctly before we sew it on, right sides facing. Your points will match on the one side, but your other point at the top will be coming off. I'm going to push this under the needle just a little bit so it doesn't get crunched up. Alright, so now I'm going to snip all of these apart, and then we will press them again open. Alright, so after you have all these sewn together, we are going to press those and also square them up to I believe 3.5 by 2 inches, or the size that's mentioned in the pattern. Alright, I'm going to take my flying geese and I'm going to square them up, or trim them up to 3.5 to 2. So what I'm going to do is line up my, I think that's a 45-degree angle ruler. So I've got a line on my ruler that's 45. I'm going to line it up with that seam, and then I am going to make sure that my 3.5 starts from the point to the other point. So you might have to move the angle just a little bit to get this right and shift it up and down, but that edge right there is what I want. And then I know it's 2 inches wide, so I'm going to trim it to 2, and then I can trim it to the 3.5. Then make sure that it's straight up and down. So it takes a little bit of you getting used to how to trim the flying geese, but that turns out pretty good. The next section that we're going to be putting together is the corner pieces, and these are the ones we laid out earlier with the solid backgrounds in the corners, offset with the half square triangles, and the background is on the inside. So we're going to sew those together and then put our sections together. So I'm just going to do one of the top and one of the bottom, and then just keep chaining them right through. What that does is we'll put pairs together, so then they're easily sewn together, and there's 4 of these sections. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just snip them off in pairs. So I have the top and the bottom section together. If I can get it open here. These are still opposite. They're in a good spot, so I can just place them together, kind of play with that seam and make sure they line up nice, and then sew them together. I can snip off my first pair, make sure they're lined up properly. Now that I have them all done, I can snip them apart and then press them open. So I'm going to start laying this out. So I need 4 of them with the flying geese here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then I have 4 triangles on the bottom. And then got 2, 3, 4 triangles here and 4 triangles here. All right, and then I'm going to take my triangles. These are the 2.5-inch squares that were left over from the previous step. So here is my larger flying geese units. And so I'm going to sew these together, as well as my center star. Got the center block, and then my 4 corners, and my flying geese units, which will be sewn to each side of the block, and then my corner squares. So now that I've got these 2 units laid out, I'm going to go take them to my sewing machine and sew them up. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to work on my star. So I'm just going to sew them in sections, and then, or sew them into rows. So here's my center block with my flying geese. And the bottom left corner with the other flying geese. I can snip off this first section and add my other corner. I'm going to snip the second section off and add my other flying geese to the other side. Making sure I have this lined up right. Going to adjust it so my seam lays flat. And then I'm going to snip my last section and sew the last corner on. Now I can snip off those first 2 parts and sew those together. They're ready to go. Just make sure they open up properly. Line them up. Play with the seams if you need so they lay flat. You can pin them if you need to, that's fine. Because we need all the pieces, I'm going to snip the whole thing out and then make sure that's off. And then sew the last to the bottom of it. I'm going to sew with the larger section on the top so I can see where those seams are laid, because these are already going down and I don't want it to go a different direction because that creates bulk. So I'm going to let it go where it wants to, or where it's supposed to actually. Alright, just continue. Put my needle down so it doesn't shift. Make sure that seam's going the way I want it to. Alright, so now I have my center star complete and I can press that. Now I'm going to work on the other sections. So the first part to doing this is to sew our triangles to the outside of the flying geese. So you're going to line the top flat edge up, and the corner point is going to be coming off of the block. Just going to repeat that 4 times. Okay, and then we're going to just snip them apart, and we're going to repeat that process for the other side. We don't need to press it yet because it doesn't affect anything, so just going to keep on going. I'm going to snip that last piece off and add that. Again, if you need to lay it out, make sure you've got them in the right directions. Do it. Sometimes they get all messed up and switched around. So, especially for these side triangle pieces, they're a little tricky sometimes. And the last one. That one shifted on me just a little bit. I'm going to maneuver it back. Alright, so these all get snipped apart, and then we're going to press them and add one more triangle to them. Alright, now that I have my flying geese units with the 2 triangles completed, I'm going to now line up or add my last triangle on. If you want, you can fold this triangle in half and pinch it and make sure it is centered on the flying geese, and you're going to line it up to the top of the flying geese. If you have little points coming off, like here and here, don't line this up to those. Line it up to the edge of the flying geese, and then you're going to sew these on. You're going to repeat the process for all 4. Again, center it on that edge. Alright, now I'm going to separate these and press them. Now that I have them all pressed, I'm going to line them back up again. And I believe they go this way. And my corners go just like this. So this is a large point of the outside star. So we're going to repeat the same process of lining these up. Again, the points are going to match, and then the one edge point will be hanging off. So we're going to line up the straight line. I'm going to scoot that over and stitch these down, repeating the same for all 4. I'm going to snip these off, and actually I want the other one as well, because we're going to press these and then we're going to sew to the other side. So I have them all pressed, and then I'm going to repeat the same process for the other side. Make sure I'm going the right direction, my pieces aren't turned, and again I'm going to line up. I need one piece at a time here. I'm going to line up the points, and then this other side will be hanging off. Okay, I've got it snipped out. I'm going to separate all of these, press them, and then I'm going to put my sections together. Alright, now that I have my pieces all trimmed, you're going to trim your flying geese to 3.5 by 6.5, and then you will be laying your flying geese out. So your flying, or you lay your quilt block out. So your flying geese are on the, they're pointing to the outside, and then these smaller units will be sewn in place as well. So I've got my finished quilt block to look like this, and now I will be sewing it together. I'm going to make sure that I have my outer corners in the right, going the right direction. I think I do now. All right, so I'm going to move these three and keep them in order. And I'm going to just shift those over to the left, and I'm going to sew up my first part. I noticed on one of my flying geese units that I totally cut the points. I don't know what happened there when I was squaring it up, but I was clearly not paying attention. But I'm just going to sew them together anyways, because I'm like that. And so pay attention when you're trimming your flying geese up that you don't cut your points off, because that is a mistake on my part. All right, I'm going to snip off that first row part, make sure I've got it in the right order, and then I'm going to add my other corner piece to the opposite side of the flying geese. My seam kind of jiggled there. I'm going to shift it out again. I'm going to snip the center section. Add my other flying geese unit to this one. And my last unit, which is the bottom row. And line that one up. Alright, now I can snip off these two bigger sections and sew them together. I'm going to make sure that my intersections are lined up properly for those rows, and the seams fold where they need to be, so they're right up against each other. Make some adjustments, make sure everything's lined up before I continue on. I can feel the seam under here being funny, so I'm going to lift it up and adjust. Okay, and my last seam, we'll be putting together the large section with the top to the bottom. So I'm just going to make sure I've got everything together. I'm going to sew it with this larger section on the top because it's already stitched down to the other piece, so I know which directions my seams should go when I get to them. Okay, so I'm going to look over here and the seam is going up. So this top one needs to go up and the bottom one needs to go down. Gonna make that adjustment right there. I'm gonna line everything up as well. I'm gonna look right here. This one's going opposite directions as well, so fix that. Make sure that seam's going the right way. All right, so now my San Diego quilt block is complete and I will press it.